Hey, have you come across the new buzzword in mental health? The new way to boost self esteem. Okay, another hint, it's the new form of self love. Do you know what word I'm talking about? If yes, do mention it in the comments below. So, the word that I'm referring to is boundaries, or as my sir calls it, the no go zone. This word has a separate zing to it, of course. So, when I say the word boundaries, you might have come across it while scrolling through social media, or reading a self help book, or while communicating with a friend or a family member. So, when I say boundary, oh, please don't think of it as a physical boundary that exists between India and Nepal or Sydney and Melbourne. But the boundaries that I am referring to is the life enhancing system of yes and no's that you create for yourself and your inner peace. Boundaries are like these stop signs and borders that you install in your life to protect yourself and make good choices in life. But the important question to ask here is how to create this space. What are boundaries all about? And most importantly, why do we even need to set these limits around us? Hello, Calm Sage family. We welcome you back to Thursday's special talk show, Speak Your Mind, the Judgment Free Zone. To help you understand the concept of boundary in detail, we have a special guest with us. Our guest of the day is a gold medalist in applied psychology from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and IIS University, Jaipur. Ms. Shiromi Chaturvedi is a mental health professional who has a work experience of more than 3 years in the field of counseling, education, and mentoring. So, we welcome you, Shiromi.
Hi, Anjali. Thank you.
So, Shiromi, how have you been? And you have recently started your own mental wellness page, which is so well organized and so aesthetic to look at. So, how is that going and how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for asking. I think I started the page also with this in mind. I wanted it to be aesthetic, which is why it's so it's not very. I don't have too many posts up there because I'm very, very careful about what I want to put on my page because there's a lot of information on mental health and a lot of misinformation also about mental health, but a lot of it can be jargon filled, or it can be a little overwhelming for the clients or the general public to look at because it's just so many words, there's so many images. So yeah, I like to keep a slightly clean aesthetic and give talk about just one thing and then talk about that in detail and make sure that it's based in research. So yeah, that was the idea behind the social therapist. The therapist who talks about social causes and social things and how society impacts you. But yeah, so that's how it's going. I do think that it becomes difficult for me with a full-time job and a full-time practice to kind of make time for these posts, especially because I want them to look a certain way. But yeah, I've had interns who helped me and we've been able to maintain the aesthetic and the spirit and the vibe of the page. So hoping to keep doing that.
I must say that your ideology and the output on the page is vibing and thriving together. So, way to go, girl. So, thank you so much and good luck for your page and for your full time session thing as well. And yes, so why don't we start now with our session with you introducing us with the new buzzword in the field of mental health, and that is boundaries. I would especially request you to tell us that what a boundary is and what it is not, because sometimes in the name of boundary people start being a little rude or being constricted to themselves as well. So it would be of great help if you could tell us what boundary is, what boundary is not. So over to you, Shiromi.
Okay, Anjali, I'll try and explain. So I wouldn't define it because I think there's so many definitions floating around already. But I think from my understanding of boundaries, it is just defining this invisible line around you in different spheres of life to ensure that you are not feeling a sense of violation. Like everything that's happening in your life, you have consent in it, and there's informed consent. So I think those are words that we haven't been taught, unfortunately, as children or even as adolescents or young adults. So hence a lot of emphasis on, say, work-life boundaries, or financial boundaries, or personal boundaries, or sexual boundaries. So, there are a lot of various types of boundaries. But at the end, it's just how much am I willing to kind of engage with, whether it's thoughts, feelings, emotions, behavior. How much am I okay with? How much am I not okay with? Again, just because I'm establishing a boundary doesn't mean that I have to be like, hey, don't enter my space. Boundaries can be established very gently, very politely. Again, because of the systems that exist around us, the person who's on the receiving end of boundaries can sometimes feel like, okay, this is too much, or, I'm being kind of left out. But those are places where you negotiate and have a conversation, right? And then, of course, the last category of boundaries, which I always say for the end, is non-negotiable boundaries. So things that are an absolute no for you, but the whole point of having non-negotiable boundaries is that you only have a few of those and you actually implement them as well, right? If my non-negotiable boundary is that I don't drink, but then every time I'm out with friends, I end up doing it, then it's not a non-negotiable. Yeah. So various type of boundaries, but at the end of the day, my sense of self needs to be protected. I should not feel that I'm not being true to myself. So basically, the boundary should try and protect my sense of self, who I am, what I'm true to. However, it should not restrict me to my comfort zone either. So there should always be space for me to grow, right? Not because of say wanting to be more productive, but just because I want to be a better version of myself. So I should always be open to expanding my boundaries if I need to. But at the end of the day, again, it has to be true to me. It should make me feel genuine and authentic.
I think this is a very beautiful line that you have just said, that boundaries should not make you feel like, okay, I'm just, being someone for the sake of being it, but it should align with your real and authentic self. So thank you for touching on it, Shiromi. I have this concern always that although the word boundaries have recently popped in our lives, on our social media platforms, in self-help books, but I believe that somewhere at subconscious level, we all have that invisible layer or, glass shield around us. So do you think that we all are somewhere at some point in our life are having these invisible boundaries at subconscious level, which we just don't have any name of as of now? We just don't have any name, or we can't call it boundary because we don't know there's a concept like this. So do you think it is like that we have a subconscious layer around us?
See, definitely, I do think that we, if we were to go by the Freudian way of, looking at conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, I do think that our ego tries to protect us, right? It does want us to kind of reduce our intrapsychic conflicts. At the same time, I think when we don't define boundaries, right, when we don't bring it to the conscious, then it becomes slightly more problematic, because then it's like the self also not aware of, and people in our life are also not aware of. So I could get pissed off at someone or something and not really know where it's coming from, as opposed to boundaries where I will perhaps clarify it to you, what I'm okay with. So it's very important to bring boundaries to your conscious awareness. So all of us do feel it at a subconscious or at an unconscious level, but that's the whole point, that we need to become more aware of what is not feeling right, why is it not feeling right, and then communicating it too. So I think I'll give an example from our work life, since I'm presuming a lot of young individuals who are in the workspace will be watching this. So a lot of times, say if I'm being made to stay longer hours, without recognition, or if I'm being called at home when it was my personal time, making me feel guilty, or a lot of times during COVID, there was no concept of work hours, and the whole subtext that you're already on a vacation, right? You're already on break. So I think what happens is, over a period of time, if we don't recognize what exactly is bothering me, then I will become resentful of my own job, or I will stop enjoying the work I do, or perhaps not put in quality work. And all of this is happening without my proper awareness as well. As opposed to if I were to recognize, okay, when I'm receiving work calls after 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., I'm not really enjoying it. I need to, communicate it. Once I've communicated it, I have also articulated it for myself. I've articulated it for my colleagues. Now when they call, then I know that, okay, this is what I'm angry at. I'm not angry at the job. I'm not angry at the work I do. I'm actually dissatisfied with this aspect. So I either try and solve it, or I try and find a space which is more collaborative, or, I'm able to kind of find ways to restrict this down. but it doesn't show up in unconscious ways or subconscious ways through my other work.
That was a very relatable example, I must say. And this brings me to another type of boundary, that is digital boundary. So if you allow me, I would like to share my personal example that, people always used to ping me that, you're not taking our calls, you're not staying connected with us. And I used to feel guilty that am I that bad of a friend that I don't revert them as soon as, they share something on Instagram or as soon as they message me on WhatsApp. But later on, when I was introduced to the concept of boundary, I understood that no, it is not like that I should be, constantly 24/7 available to others. If I have my own window, that this is the time when I'll be seeing my social media. So my, friend should get it straight away that then I'll have my phone in my hand. That is the only time I'll see what post you are sharing with me, unless it's something very, very urgent. So yes. So this is how I learned to create digital boundaries. So instead of feeling guilty that, oh my God, I'm such a bad friend, now I have this thing clear that, all right, I'm not bad. It's just that, I have to create this space so that I have my time and I have a separate time for my digital devices. So completely. Shiromi, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, so true actually, Anjali. Just to take that forward, digital well-being is now so important, and unfortunately, all of these all of these applications, whether it's WhatsApp or Instagram or anything, they've made they've become spies in our life. There's constant tracking. So if you're online, then why haven't you replied to my message? Like, you can turn off like your blue ticks and your normal ticks and whatever, but you can't turn off online. Right? And I just feel like I could have come online for 5 minutes to look at something, because so much of our work is also done on WhatsApp now, and then I've gone back. And I may sometimes need a day, to come back and respond to you. Or maybe I want to give you a response that requires time and I'm not in the headspace to do it. But the whole, the difference that has taken place is, I think that earlier when we were growing up, we had to wait for a lot of things, which our current generation, and ourselves included, now we don't have to. So earlier when you had to watch a movie, you had to wait for it to be released, and then you had to wait for your parents to kind of agree, okay, we will go out, and then you went and watched that movie. Or even if we were watching a TV series, you had to wait every week, sometimes you would just not have cable connection, and then you'd just be sad. Or if you had to go shopping, you had to either get good marks or really convince your parents, and then they had to be in a good mood and you had to show up. Right? So a lot of these things built a very important skill in us, which was patience. And I think that currently we are not using that at all, because everything's available at a click. So if I want to buy something, I'll just go on to Myntra and just shop. If I don't like it, I'm going to return it. It's so easy, right? If I'm not feeling good about myself, I just post a picture of mine on social media, instant likes. So I think instant gratification has become so key in all of our lives that that's what we expect. So if my partner is not answering my call, I'm just like, why aren't you responding to me? You don't love me anymore. Maybe he's in a meeting. I just think that there's this urgency all the time, and this is false urgency. We don't need it. And all of the good things in life actually take time. Whether it's your career, whether it's your relationship, whether it's anything fulfilling or fruitful, it takes time, it takes patience. And we are a generation which is sorely lacking in patience. So I think digital well-being is a must. All of us need to have time slots for social media. We have to have self-imposed restrictions, because otherwise, it's not going down well.
And we can spend hours and hours on social media, of course, which is not healthy. And plus this, with this discussion, I would like to highlight one important point, that boundaries is not about just, creating your own no-go zone and expecting people to respect it. At the same time, we should also have a space, a room, and our mental state where we are accepting and respecting others' boundary as well. So thank you, Shirley, for elaborating on this one point too. So, when, as I was telling you, that when I was introduced to the concept of boundaries, I had many questions and concerns popping in my head as well. But one of the questions that I really wanted to get an answer was, for that, why do we need this fence of yes or no around me? So Shiromi, would you like to share with us some key benefits of healthy boundaries? Plus, if you could also touch upon that, what poor boundaries or unhealthy boundaries do to us. So because we just touched upon the subconscious part. So yes,
Hmm.
we're not really aware of it, and if it is unhealthy, it will impact us negatively. So if you can touch on both the aspects of boundaries, please.
Yeah. See, I'm going to start with something really unpopular, and that is the fact that we live in a collectivistic culture, right? Which is predominantly patriarchal. So the expectation, especially from women or even men in that matter, is to be a certain way, right? And what is usually glorified is sacrifice and martyrdom. Okay. So as soon as you live in a culture where, oh, I'm going to go to switch to Hindi, but like, meri khushi zaruri nahi hai. But I must live in servitude of others. So I must sacrifice in order for me to be happy and others to be happy. Right? So I think that is a very, very flawed structure that we live in. And that creates all the problems because people have, so you will see a lot that people will get married because there's nothing better to do. Rarely do I ever hear people that, oh, we both really click, we have the same dreams, we really want to grow together, so we want to take the lead. Right? A lot of times it's either pressure or it's just the fact कि अच्छा ठीक है, अब शादी कर लो तो सब better हो जाएगा, and then have kids so it will get better. And what is the concept of having kids? That they will take care of me in my old age, right? So there's this thing कि okay, I have to take care of my parents, not because I inherently want to or I should, because that's a good human thing to do, but because this is what society expects from me. Right? So we get trapped in that whole thing where parents have certain expectations and we have certain like moral obligations or duties, and that kind of spreads across in all our relationships, right? So there has to be like, I will sacrifice my career for you, or I will sacrifice, X thing for you or Y thing for you, and you should love me more for it. But I strongly believe that, if we all just try to be happier, fuller versions of ourselves, then we could create a society and a much more like inclusive place where everyone can grow in the way that they want to. So I think unhealthy is the very fact that we have these expectations which rely on others, right? And we learn it unfortunately from our families. कि हमारे साथ time नहीं spend किया. But are we actually doing something meaningful, or are we just staring at a TV screen in that time? Are we playing games? Are we talking to each other? Do we even have that comfort zone? That if I'm facing some trouble, can I take it home? Okay. Another thing, even if I have that space to take it home, do I want to impose my emotional baggage there, or do I want to process it in therapy or through self-care? Right? So a lot of this is what is problematic. So saying yes and no is increasingly important in this time or space. Again, nobody wants to listen to no in our culture. But तो boundaries का सबसे important part है कि we need to be able to define what am I okay with, what am I not okay with. Again, explaining it is important, right? So after a lot of times, I'll give a personal example. So when I've had like say a tough session or a heavy session, and after that I'm visibly like distressed, and my mother would often ask me, what happened? Tell me. And I would be like, no, like I need to process this on my own, and she would just be perturbed, like, but I could help, like I can just listen, and that itself will help. And I'm like, but this is not the space for that. I have my supervisor, or I have my therapist to do this with. So you have to consistently engage, and then I have to explain to her that, okay, this will also bring you down. I'm still trained, I still have the tools, or I can ask for tools from others, but why should I talk to you? It's not just for me. Boundaries are for both parties involved. If you're talking about physical boundaries or sexual boundaries, again, a topic which is touched upon very less. So if I'm able to communicate it clearly, then it's helping both me and my partner. No, if I have a clear-cut thing that, okay, before marriage, I want to abstain from sex, and then I'm with a partner who doesn't know it and doesn't believe in it, for example, so then we are both wasting our time. Right? As opposed to if I clearly communicate it and he, she, or they respect it, great. If not, we find other partners who are more attuned to what our needs are. And there are people, with similar needs. So I think saying yes or no also opens up the possibilities of finding that facilitative space. And if we don't know what to say no to, then we end up saying yes to everything. And we don't know, what exactly I wanted to do. So I think that's why it's very, very important.
Right. And I think it somewhere, protects our self-esteem, our self-worth as well. That, instead of saying yes to everything just for the sake of it, just to be a people pleaser as well, you know that exactly when to, draw a line between saying yes or no. I was saying that, it does add to our self-worth, because we know that, okay, I'm not doing for the sake of pleasing others, or I'm not doing it at, putting forward my own, putting away my own needs. So that yes or no boundary or the fence that we create does protect our self-esteem, our self-worth, and it definitely is a shield for us to stop being a people pleaser. And I think we all know that being a people pleaser does not come with many benefits. So
yeah, and I was just, and I think this is also something that we learn from our society, right? The very first time when the kid is forced, ki, acha, uncle, auntie aaye hain, ab inhe poem sunao. But does the child want to recite the poem? Does the child want to shake their hand? Does the child want to hug them? These are like things that, again, and our parents didn't know, because this concept wasn't there. So it's not like, they wanted us to have loose sense of boundaries, but just in any collectivistic culture, our actions are a part of greater domain. So it becomes much harder, and we become people pleasers because love is conditional, right? So acceptance, love, all of this is conditional on my behavior. So if I'm available to you 24/7, then you'll be my best friend. Otherwise, you're a bad friend, right? But doesn't it mean that I'm there for you when you really need me? It can't be 24/7. If you need me 24/7, then we have other, stuff to discuss. But I think that's very important, that we learn people pleasing from those around us, because we're trained that way. That it is contingent. You being liked is contingent on the way you look, or the way you dress up, or the marks that you get, or your caste, or your class, or your gender, or your race. Like, we're not even getting into any of those socio-cultural constructs right now. But because we've been told so much that you have to be a certain way to be liked, to be accepted, to be loved, so we keep doing that. And in that process, we lose ourselves. And the second thing that you pointed out, very important, self-worth. Only when we think that I'm worthy of being heard, that my needs are legitimate, my desires also hold space, then I will feel comfortable in expressing it. That, okay, I'm okay with this, I'm not okay with this. That means that I actually feel like I deserve to have a voice. But for people who've never been given that voice, it's very difficult, right? They don't think, they feel like, but how can I say no?
So that, and as you said that it's not just you have it subconsciously here in your head, you need to also communicate, so that you have clarity in your life and you know exactly where the emotions are coming from. So instead of blaming that, oh my god, my work life is very bad, no, it is just that the boundary is not communicated. Perhaps the outcomes are such. So yes. So now, Shiromi, coming to the part which I believe most of our viewers are also waiting for, and that is, how do we create this no-go zone, or how do we create boundaries around us and also communicate them effectively to others? So yes, please.
So I think there are 5-6 broad headers, right, which I would want everyone to think and reflect about when they go back from this. Physical boundaries, sexual boundaries, emotional boundaries, financial boundaries, and then I think non-negotiable boundaries, right? So, and I'm mentioning financial especially because, again, there's a lot of shame in discussing finance, even in families, even in relationships, we don't really discuss it. So I do think that physical boundaries are a sense of, okay, what is okay with me in my space? Do I like to be touched? Do I not like to be touched? A lot of people actually don't enjoy hugs. I have a friend who hates them. So I just saw her after 3 years recently. And I was like, can I get 30-second long hug this time? And after 20 seconds, she's like, okay, I'm done. And I was like, fine. Then when you're leaving, then I get 60 seconds. So, this is just on a light note. But I still think that some of us are okay with physical touch. Some of us are not. We have to be really mindful of that. Again, even space, in physical boundaries, not just about touch. How close is someone standing to you? Sometimes people just really come very close into your space. And at which point, it's nice to be like, what, this is making me a little uncomfortable. Could you just step back a little? So instead of saying you're infringing on my space, we can always just say it, in a more polite, understandable manner. Of course, if it still continues, then we can also get a little more assertive. So that would be for physical boundaries. Then again, for sexual boundaries, I think a lot of exploration is needed within. What am I okay with? Why am I okay with it? Is it really to explore, experiment, and grow? Or is it because I feel like the pressure to be cool, like I'm missing the wagon, right? and then communicating that to your partner. And also, again, like I always say, boundaries should be a little negotiable, in the sense that it shouldn't start off a place with rigid. It can, over a period of time, as you recognize yourself more and more, become slightly stricter. But at least initially, you should be more in an exploratory phase. Then when we come to emotional boundaries, what am I okay with? A lot of times, especially in our families with our partners, people say things they don't mean, right? So in India, it's very, very acceptable that wo to gusse mein keh diya na, wo to we didn't mean. So what are you okay with listening to, right? And I do think that it can sometimes happen that people say stuff that they don't mean in anger. However, it's not okay for me to receive that, to be the recipient of it, to be your emotional punchbag. So to be very, very clear about what's okay, what's not okay, even in anger. Because a lot of times things are justified under the garb or pretext of anger. And when we come to financial boundaries, how much am I okay with spending? So maybe I'm not someone who can eat out in a canteen every day, whether I'm in college or I'm in the workspace. So am I able to say that, you know what, I don't want to spend so much, I would rather bring lunch from home? Or, you know, my budget for tonight is about 2,000, I don't want to go beyond that, so could we go to a place like that? Or I don't want to order beyond this. So things like that, you know.
Nice. I think this we often, feel trapped in that, okay, friends are going out, how can I say no, and things like that. And often if someone really is courageous and I think self-conscious enough to say that, okay, this is my limit, I won't spend beyond it, somewhere we might end up judging, and that is where the point of respect others' boundary come to play.
Yes.
So yes,
and I think that is the hardest part, right? We haven't created a space which is facilitative or nurturing in nature. Like even if our friends, say no to us, we feel like, "Arey yaar, what is this? But you're earning so much." We don't know everyone's responsibilities, right? Like you don't know if they're the sole breadwinner of their family, or if they have a loan on them, or what exactly is happening, right? A lot of women in that regard are trying to be financially independent. A lot of men have the added burden of taking care of their family single-handedly. So with all of these constructs, we really have to be open and accepting that, okay, I may be okay with spending X money, but I can't expect that from my friends as well. And also checking for nuances. So if your friend is cancelling again and again, are you just blaming them, or are you taking the time to ask what's wrong? Let's have a conversation about what's not working for you. And even as young entrepreneurs, I think people who are setting up businesses or enterprises, I think it's very important that you look at your employee well-being. And are they happy when they show up to work? Do they have smiles on their faces? Are they driven? If that's not happening, then we have somehow managed to not make this a workspace where people want to work, right? They're coming in because it gives them their paycheck. But I think if we all create better boundaries, then that also includes respecting other people's boundaries, right? And so as a team lead, maybe I'm okay with working 12 hours or 14 hours or 16 hours in a day. I can't have that expectation from my team, right? So, and I think I also wanted to add something as far as creating boundaries is concerned. So when we are creating, I think we first have to recognize, right? Like what I was saying, we have to recognize what values are important to you. What do you want to say yes to? What do you want to say no to? Why do you want to say yes or no to that? What is the learning or unlearning that has happened? And then, of course, there are steps to take. So you can say it nicely, you can say it politely, you can get a little more assertive. You can have consequences in place eventually. That if this is not respected, then like in a non-negotiable boundary, so a lot of people have that in relationships, right? That fidelity is a hard no, or violence is a hard no. So if this ever happens, I walk out. Yeah. So you have to, but you'll only be able to walk out if you believe in that enough. So you have to really explore it. So I think the first stage is always exploration before creation. Usually we've not explored it enough, then we don't believe in it enough. So we don't implement it.
Very well said that, if you haven't explored it, you won't believe it. And perhaps you let others trespass it very easily because, in that state of self-doubt that, do I really need to have this space? Do I really need this no-go zone? Or, shall I let people walk in and walk out of the same? So very empowering life that you should first explore before you learn to believe it and then create it. So, yes, viewers, please make a note that first explore to believe and then go on creating your boundaries. And this brings me, Shiromi, to my next question that I read somewhere: walls keep everybody out, boundaries teach where the door is. And I believe many a times people go on creating these walls instead of guiding others to the door, which can be simplified as people end up creating unhealthy boundaries instead of healthy ones. So I would request you to help our viewers to, make a note of certain do's and don'ts when they are setting and also implementing boundaries in their life. So, yes.
So I think the biggest do for me is, again, what motivates me to create this boundary? How does it help me? Definitely. How does it help our relationship? Right? So whether it's my colleague, whether it's my friend, whether it's my partner, whether it's my parent, how is it facilitative to both of us? Because genuinely, if it's a healthy boundary, it will help both. Always, without exception. Right? It may seem, because again we are stuck in certain structures, it may seem like, no, it's only for me, it's only for empowering me. But if you empower yourself, that automatically means that it's become a more balanced relationship. So I think it's very important to first understand how it benefits you, also how it facilitates or improves your relationship in context, right? Second of all, unhealthy is when it's too restrictive. Right? You are never stepping out of your comfort zone. And every time you are required to do something that feels even slightly uncomfortable, you're just saying, no, boundary. Okay. And while I don't believe in the concept of sacrifice at all, I do think that relationships exist on give and take. Right? So say even in a workplace environment, maybe I have to work an extra Saturday because my colleague is taking off for some family emergency. And then I can have that same expectation from them. That, okay, you sub in for me. So this is not really, oh, I lost my boundary. Right? This is me stepping out of my comfort zone once in a while and then having it reciprocated as well. Similarly, in my relationship, I will need to kind of, be okay with certain things so that my partner can also be, because inherently we are imperfect people. So we can't expect an ideal perfect world. So there will need to be, certain middle ground to be created. But again, if we are careful, then that middle ground is created with that foresight that this is going to build and nurture our relationship. Okay. Again, what are the principles or tenets that guide this relationship? Are they equality? Right? Are they love and compassion? Or are they sacrifice? So I think that is very important. Anything that you think, and always be open to listening to others. Maybe you from your end are just creating a boundary, but it feels like the person on the other side has just been left out in the open alone, right? So include them in, explain to them why this is the way that it is, why this is important to you, why over a period of time we can re-look at this as well.
True. This point I think is important, that once you create a boundary, it should not be like, it's set in stone there. It should have certain plasticity to it as well. That yes, you can modify it if the time or the situation asks for it. Like you said that, okay, I won't work on Saturday, but if my colleague needs me, so fine. I can mold it a little, twist it a little. I can't always be defensive and my fangs out in the name of boundary. And need to know that, okay, this is the time when I can actually, surpass it, or give other things value this time. And I would like to just add one important point, that boundaries, when we are communicating, Shiromi, if you have any point to add, so please feel free to give your feedback on the same. That when we are communicating our boundary, I think we should implement it by taking the responsibility of it, by which I mean to say, use I statements instead of using you statements. Like if we both are talking and I say that, what, Shiromi, you want to go to lavish places, but I have this financial boundary. I don't want to, you make me explore those places, but I don't want to do it. So instead of you and you, I should comment that I have this budget constraint and I am not allowing myself to spend more than this particular month. So I'm sorry, but I have to cancel on the plan. So, instead of blaming the other person for how you're feeling, take the sole responsibility and create your own boundaries. That's a one do that I would like our viewers to make a note of, that while communicating boundaries, make sure it's coming from I, because that is something you need and it is something that is based on your motivation. So, yes, thank you, Shiromi. And viewers, I hope now it's more clearer to you that it's okay to have your boundaries a little plastic. You should not always constrain yourself in those walls. Make sure it is a door which opens and closes occasionally depending on the situation. So, yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And the boundary is supposed to help you grow. So if at any point of time you're feeling like I've been stuck, then that means the boundary is actually unhealthy. Because it's not supposed to be restrictive in nature at all. And I think Anjali's brought up a very, very good point about I statements, taking accountability and responsibility and saying that, okay, I'm not comfortable with this. Maybe this is something that works for you. Even in couple work, this is what we usually do. So even if we have to make a you statement, what we say is, when you force me to make a plan, I feel unheard or embarrassed or ashamed. So, we also talk about our feelings. So as soon as, because when you say that, I don't like this, then a lot of times people are like, so why do I care? They also become defensive. I think taking it one step deeper is to express your emotions, right? Because emotions make you vulnerable. They also make the other person more receptive and less defensive in most cases, in healthy cases at least. So when you go to someone and say, you know what, when you force me to make a plan, I feel unheard, I feel unsafe, I feel embarrassed, then the person's going to be like, oh, okay, I don't want to make you feel these things. Now and if you want to be more solution oriented, you can say, so in the future, I would appreciate if instead of asking like on our group chat, you ask me personally and we can communicate this. Yeah. So I think, I statements definitely, and even if you want to include like you statements, make them collaborated. So when you do this, I feel this, right? Instead, I would hope you would do this so we can both feel, heard and understood.
True. Yes. I think either I statement or collaborative one will do the work. I think, Shrumi, another point that I want to touch upon here, or it's a question directed to you instead, that often people can't draw a fine line between am I modifying my boundary or is it being trespassed? So, would you like to share some signs or some clues that a person should get when they're talking of violation of their boundaries, so that they're not in the confused state that, oh my god, should I modify my boundary here or is it being violated? So yes.
So when you're having this conversation, right, because this would be stemming out of a conversation, so you have to see that am I feeling heard first of all, or am I just being coaxed into changing it? Right? So a lot of times, like I have a client right now who's struggling with, so her partner follows a certain path and he's kind of made it contingent that you either follow this path or we're not going to be together anymore. Is there a threat involved? Right? Even if there is, for example, a threat per se, is it something that is okay, fine, that we've been together for 4-5 years and now I really want to discuss this, so whether it's buying a house or investing together, things like that which are eventually supposed to happen, is it something like that, or is it something that goes against my very tenets? Is it being explained in a way that is understandable? And I think the best way usually that I encourage my clients to engage with, and that really works for me as well, is ask yourself, if your best friend came to you and told you this, what would you say? Would you say agree or disagree? Would you agree to this boundary? Would it feel healthy or not? Because a lot of times we are in love, or we are so used to our families, or we are so used to toxic work environments, it's difficult for us to recognize whether it's a compromise, whether it's middle ground or a sacrifice, or infringement or violation of boundaries. So it's very important that you say that, okay, if this was my friend, what advice would I give her or him or them? So that's very important. A lot of times that answers the question, because for others, we are able to see things a little more rationally and objectively, as opposed to when we are looking at it from a very personal lens.
I think it's a very small and a very helpful exercise that you have just shared with us, that, treat yourself like you would treat your best friend, and then you'll get more rational answers. So yes, very nice, Shiromi. This was an empowering exercise. So viewers, next time when you feel stuck, just be your own best friend and ask yourself, what would you be doing? You would be advising your best friend in that given situation. So yes. Is there anything else, Shiromi, that you would like to touch upon in terms of violation?
I think, see, violation of boundaries, usually the kind of boundaries we're talking about is still more consent oriented in nature. However, there are certain boundaries which are completely infringed, right? So, especially when we talk of consent and sexual boundaries, a lot of times in public spaces or even in personal spaces, with friends you thought you could trust, there will be this pushing of the boundary where they're just testing waters, and if it doesn't go down well, then they will be very quick to say, oh, you know what, I was under the influence, or I was just kidding, or you can't take a joke. So your personal, physical, sexual boundaries are not a joke at all, right? At times you may feel uncomfortable in saying no, but I would really urge you, this is the hardest one to sorry I'll say that again. This is the hardest one to kind of say a strict no in, that I don't feel comfortable, like just no, back off. It's very, very important, because sometimes the violation of boundary is actually a criminal offense. So be very, very mindful of the fact that there is a term such as sexual assault. It can be happening in your home, it can be happening by your partner, it can be happening by your friend, by your boss, but it is still assault. You're still protected legally. So boundaries is a very nice empowering concept, but the other side of it, right, is complete violation. So we have to be very, very strong, and there are a lot of like support groups and access points where you can kind of seek help. So always be open to that, and just know that if it's a clear-cut violation, then you perhaps need to really focus on your safety and security first and foremost. Everything else will follow. But you need to be safe, you need to safeguard yourself and your kind of body. So that's very important.
Nice. Thank you so much, Shiromi. I think with these questions, we have covered most of the, information that we can impart on our viewers related to boundaries, from what it is not, how to set healthy boundaries, what types of boundaries are available, and when do we know that they are being violated and they are being respected. So I would like to bring the session to an end, but before we leave, if you have any, life message or any empowering words to share with the viewers that will just make their day, please feel free to share with us.
So this is one of my favorite quotations from Harry Potter, which says, happiness can be found in the darkest of times only if you remember to turn on the light. So in that regard, I would just want to say that turn on the light within, explore what you really want, what you really believe in, why you believe in it, question it. And then once, you've gone through that self-reflection, self-examination, then keep remembering to turn on the light. Even if it feels really dark, even if you feel like you're all alone, you will find help if you ask for it, right? And you will find happiness, if you just strive towards it.
Thank you so much, Shiromi. That was, I think, an awesome learning, especially during, the times we have currently been into. We really need to look for the switch and turn on the light. And boundaries is one of the way, I think, to turn on this light. So viewers, I hope that you are going to make a note of it and you'll start practicing this new form of self-care, which is known as boundary, aka the no-go zone, and will lead a mentally healthy life. If you have any other questions popping in your head, please drop them down in the comment section, and our guest speaker and the expert of the day, along with the team Calm Sage, will surely get back to you with consolidated answers. Thank you. Stay safe, take care, and PS, don't forget to make your boundaries and at the same time respect boundaries of others, because as Shiromi said, that it's a two-way thing. So let us not forget the other person in the picture. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anjali. Great talking to you.
Shiromi, same here.